What up, Buck Squad? I'm your host, Jaron Spor. I'm going to tell you why I'm not as confident in Mike Evans returning to Tampa as I once was.
I'm Marcus Ray, and I'm going to tell you what I think about Khalil Mack and the possibilities of him joining the Bucs.
I'm James Yarcho, and I'm going to tell you why it doesn't matter if it's Teddy Bridgewater or Kyle Trask or anybody else backing up Baker.
Hey, Tampa Bay, it's the Buccaneers squad. Everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the Sunshine State, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. With a touch of the Buccaneer way, the Buccaneer Squad Show starts now.
What up, Buck Squad? Real quick, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, like I said, we got a packed show for you today. We're going to talk about Mike Evans. He's officially back in the NFL, but is he back to Tampa? We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about Khalil Mack. He was listed as a best fit by ESPN to go to Tampa Bay. And is Kyle Trask possibly returning? That was like an interesting one that caught my eye that when I was reading different stories, because backup quarterback, while not super important, you do need that guy. And so we'll see what happens there. And then we're going to go around the NFL, and like we talked about on Monday, we're going to do a Q&A as well, that segment. So get your questions in, wait for that segment, and then start throwing your questions at us, and we'll answer as many as we can in the allotted time. But, yeah, it was announced, I believe it was Monday or maybe it was Tuesday, that Mike Evans will return to the NFL for his next season. And, you know, that was kind of a debate for some, like, would he retire or would he stay? We were pretty confident that he would at least play another year, especially given his comments earlier in the season about, just when he was off, about really missing it. It was like, okay, he's probably coming back. And it might have been one of those things that if he played the whole year, maybe he calls it a career. But we felt pretty confident about him returning. I am not feeling as confident of him returning to Tampa because I feel like every report I've seen is him going somewhere else. And it's so weird to say that because he just feels like that guy that will just be there forever. And he's just a Tampa Bay guy, and we've talked about his wife loving it, and a lot of times that's what makes a lot of the decisions. But it's one of those things where I'm like, when I first saw a couple of the predictions, I was like, okay, no, I'm not buying it. But after you see so many, it's like, am I missing something? Like, is there something that I'm not seeing about Mike Evans? Now, with that being said, I forget his first name, Jason McIntyre. He had one of the dumbest takes ever on the Colin Cowherd show when he said that he's going to leave because he's chasing a Super Bowl. And his quote was, Tampa has never sniffed a Super Bowl with Mike Evans. Well, he did win a Super Bowl with Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. So I'm not using his prediction as one of my outlets. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like if there's smoke, there's fire. And so maybe we need to start bracing for that reality.
Go ahead, James.
So that is something that I've said on the regular show a couple of times, is prepare yourself for the possibility that Mike Evans is not back in a Bucs uniform. And the key thing to remember, and I just finished talking to somebody on Twitter about this, is if Mike decides to leave, that doesn't mean that it's a reflection of how he feels about Todd Bowles. It doesn't mean that, Todd Bowles is the reason that he decided to leave. There are a lot of different factors here at play. Now, I still have it at about 85% that Mike Evans returns. Now, he was close to leaving once before. He had offers on the table from Kansas City, Houston, Los Angeles. There were interested suitors. There's going to be again. That said, I think Mike is in a situation where he knows that he always has a place in Tampa. It's not going to hurt anything by him taking his time and exploring what other options are out there. And yeah, maybe he does want to go play in Buffalo with Josh Allen and James Cook and be the number one on that offense. That seems to be the trendy, sexy, connection, is Mike in Buffalo. Kansas City could be an option, though a lot of people are trying to connect the dots to have Tyreek Hill go back there. You could see him in Baltimore. who's never really had a legit number one for Lamar Jackson. There are a lot of different suitors that are, championship contenders and have been championship contenders for numerous years now. Tampa falls into that category. But the other thing to remember is it was Mike Evans walking off the field, repeating the score over and over and over again when the Bucs blew a fourth quarter lead to the Falcons. So Mike also might be sitting back and going, you know what? I'm going to wait. I know Jason wants me back. I would love to be back in Tampa. This is my home. This is where we've raised our children. This is where Ashley wants to be. But we're not going to win a championship if we don't get an edge rusher, if we don't replace Levante David at linebacker, if we don't get some help on the defense. We can't put up 40 points. So why don't I wait and see what else they're going to do before I make my decision and see if there is a team that I feel is closer to winning a championship that I could be the piece that puts them over the top. Again, I feel like Evans is more than likely to return to Tampa, but there are extenuating circumstances where I could see him, pulling a Tom Brady and playing the last 2 or 3 years of his career in another uniform.
Man, that's going to be hard to follow there, James, because you said a lot. But the one thing that I think it's more of a 60-40 that he'll return. And I think the Bucs are going to have some patience. Like you said, they're going to have to fill some needs. But I also think he wants to kind of see where some other people are going in free agency. So when you look at like what's some of his options like outside of Tampa, so that would be number one. And we talk about that all the time. But if you think about a team like the Patriots, we don't know what's going to happen with Stephon Diggs. They have a young, hot quarterback in Drake May, and they just lost in the Super Bowl. And a piece like Mike Evans could serve them extremely well. Another landing spot, think about Houston. They have a good young quarterback. So you have to understand the man is from Texas. And so, I mean, going back to play in your home state is very enticing. And so when you got Stroud down there, I know they got Nico Collins and Higgins and some guys. And then think about the Chiefs. You want to play with a guy that has won multiple Super Bowls. But the common denominator here is, I'm not saying Baker's not one of those guys. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. But we don't know if Tampa's legitimately going to be a contender. On paper, maybe, but they've got a lot of fixing to do on defense where there's some other teams out there that just need a push from a guy like him. And back to Houston, I mean, those guys were pretty good. They're 12-5 last year. So, what if Travis Kelce gets healthy and Mahomes comes back and then now you got a guy like Mike Evans in the Chiefs uniform? But then again, there's the old Buffalo Bills who obviously need a number one guy. Everybody loves Josh Allen. So the common denominator for me is Mike is going to want to go to somewhere that has a good quarterback in a system that he believes needs a guy like him. Let's be honest, there's a lot of mouths to feed in Tampa at wide receiver. There are a lot of mouths to feed, and rightfully so. So what I'm saying is at this stage of his career, he wants to get his money. He wants to win a championship, and he wants to play for a contender. And who knows, he may play 3 more years in the right situation just to try to at least tie Jerry Rice's 14 seasons with 1,000 yards.
So my big question to both of you would be, who is the team that you think is the biggest threat? Because to me, I think it's Buffalo. The reason why is, one, Josh Allen, you could argue, is the best player in football, although I would still go Patrick Mahomes until, someone takes that mantle from him. But I would probably – he's at least in the top 3 or 4. Like, Josh Allen's there. And he would be the number one there, like, without a doubt. Whereas Kansas City, I still feel like Rashee Rice is the number one, and they've got several weapons, and he'd be a great complement number 2 to him. And maybe that's what Mike is at this point in his career, a very high-end number 2. And he would fit perfect there. Houston, like you mentioned, Marcus, they have Nico Collins, who's a really good wide receiver. So he would probably, again, be a number 2 there. And again, I think he'd be a really good number 2. But to me, I feel like Buffalo is the team that I'm like, if they push, I think Buffalo could be the one that lures them away. Now, do they want to live in Buffalo? That's a big difference from Tampa Bay. Buffalo is completely opposite from Tampa. You're not getting the sunshine all year long in Buffalo, that's for sure. But for you guys, who is that team?
Well, I agree that it's Buffalo, but you take a look at kind of the situation that they're in right now. I mean, they're $12.5 million over the cap. So you're talking about, and I'm again, the cap it's there, but there's ways to manipulate it. So it would take some restructures for them to get under the cap and then to create the space that it would take to get Mike Evans. But Mike Evans is a guy that's worth it. When you take a look at teams that could be considered contenders right now, that would have the money without having to do any gymnastics to create the space. A couple of teams that we haven't mentioned, and Marcus, I think you're right on the Patriots. They tried to get Chris Godwin. He turned down $20 million more a year to, stay in Tampa compared to go to New England. But how about the San Francisco 49ers? How about giving Brock Purdy, Mike Evans and team him up with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey? And they have some young, talented receivers, but they don't have that reliable guy like Mike Evans. Or how about the Los Angeles Chargers to go play in Mike McDaniel's offense now, give Justin Herbert another big-bodied receiver. They have some weapons out there, but they don't have a Mike Evans, and that could be a piece that takes them up over the top to really contend with the Denver Broncos and contend with the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's another team that I kind of look at that would be kind of intriguing. This time last year, I would have said the Rams, but I think Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, I think they're probably set there. And then the last one would be actually the Denver Broncos. You team Mike Evans up with those young receivers they have there. My guy, Pat Bryant from the University of Illinois, but then, of course, Cortland Sutton. If you have that 1-2 punch, that can really mirror some things that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin did. And it's no secret that Sean Payton knows what Mike Evans is capable of and would probably love to have him on their roster to be a piece that gets them from the AFC Championship to the Super Bowl. So those are kind of some teams that jump out. And of course, I did mention the Ravens, but those are a couple of teams that I don't think really anybody has mentioned that make a lot of sense from a personnel standpoint and a financial standpoint.
Yeah, and it just has to make sense. And as far as the weather, Jaron, in Buffalo is pretty much the same in New England as well, too. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, those two spots, that's why I kind of slid the Houston thing in there, because I mean, it's where he's from, but there's also good weather there, and they're a contender. I would even throw a dark horse Raiders in there if they weren't so bad. I mean, that's a team that could use them, but Mike's going to go to a good football team that has an established quarterback. The thing about Mike, to me, that's most impressive is that in the regular season for his career, he averaged 15 yards per catch. He's never had a regular season with 100 catches, almost in 2016 when he had 96. But when you look at his receptions over the year, to have that type of production, to have 1,000 yards plus, his best season was 2018 as far as yards. But when you're that type of guy, you're a first down and a half every time you touch it. And when you can run the ball, you got other pieces. I think he's going to end up back in Tampa. I honestly do. But you asked, the biggest threat probably would be Buffalo. I would agree with that, because they're just going to be there. And Josh Allen needs some help. My only thing is Josh Allen runs the ball an awful lot up there too. So he's not afraid he's not going to check it down like Cousins. He's going to tuck and run and get about 700 yards. So he's going to take a piece of that pie in yardage too. But for Mike to average that, 15 yards per catch in the regular season, I just think it's phenomenal. And so there's a lot of value there too. But I still think we're going to have to wait this one out.
A sleeper team that I think he could go to, depending on what Keenan Allen does, is the Chargers. I think that would be one that I would kind of keep an eye on. Once you mentioned the Raiders, I started thinking about the Chargers more, because I've seen some things about Keenan Allen possibly leaving. And if he leaves, then I think Mike could go there, because Justin Herbert has a good reputation. I think he's a little overrated, but that's just me. And then obviously McDaniel is there, so it should be a really fun offense to play in. And so maybe he goes out there. But yeah, I think Buffalo's the top one. It's hard to say no to the Chiefs just because of what they've done in the past. Now, you're going to want to know what Patrick Mahomes' health is. James, you mentioned the Ravens. I think he fits perfect with Zay Flowers. I just don't know if that's the kind of offense that the Ravens will want to run with Lamar Jackson. Like, I think Lamar's a top quarterback, don't get me wrong, but like if it was Mahomes and Zay Flowers, then he'd be a perfect fit with Zay Flowers. Like if it's more of a passer like that or Josh Allen or whoever. And so ultimately, I do think Buffalo is the biggest threat, though. All right, coming next, Khalil Mack. How much of a possibility is that? We'll talk about it. Well, tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, we're back for another segment of the Bucs Squad Show. Just a reminder, this is extra content that we do twice a week. It's Monday and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to watch us. And it also doesn't take anything away from the great work that James does Monday through Friday, so check his work out as well. So ESPN put out, and I think it was Matt Bowen who put it out, but he did 50 free agents and their best fit. And so for Khalil Mack, he said Tampa Bay. He said the Bucs had 37 sacks last season, which ranked 18th in the league. They need to address the edges of their pass rush. And while Mack might be seen as a situational player for Todd Bowles' defense, the defender can still create disruption and get home to the quarterback. He mentioned that Mack missed 5 games last season and yet finished with 5.5 sacks and 28 pressures. I think Mack would be a really good fit obviously at the right price. He's a guy that if you could get him at a pretty cheap deal and pair him with, we talked about Bradley Chubb on Monday's show, and we've talked about Max Crosby trading for him. We've talked about some guys that they could draft. If Khalil Mack is like your rotational defensive end, that third one, I think you're really happy. Or even if he's the fourth one and kind of rotates through, I think you're really happy. But if you're paying him and he's got to be like your starter type, I'm a big Khalil Mack fan, but I don't know at this point in his career.
Well, I think Khalil Mack's best days are behind him. Obviously, he's 34, and he's a phenomenal player, Hall of Fame type guy, 116 total sacks, I believe. I don't know if he's the best. I don't know if that would be the best fit for Tampa, because I think Khalil Mack's going to be a situational player, like at this point of his career, where you're playing 40% of the snaps, maybe second and long, third and long, or first and whatever it is. But he's had one double-digit sack year in the last 8 seasons. Now the thing that I like is he played 4 years for each one of those teams, Oakland, Chicago, and then now the Chargers. 17 sacks in the 23 season. I think right then and there, that's when he peaked out. I think that was the most you were going to get out of a Khalil Mack caliber player is what we saw that season. So I think he can help the Bucs. I don't know if best fit is the right phrase that I'm looking for, but I think they can use his services. I think he comes with a lot of swagger, leadership, and a lot of respect. And so he hasn't, won a championship or anything like that, but I think he can give them what they need. Now, if he can muster up, 10 sacks, if you can get 10 sacks out of Khalil Mack right now at this age for the right price, yeah, go ahead and do it. But you still got a young guy like David Walker. I mean, he's coming back off of his knee injury and whatever the injury was, but I think it was his ACL. But, it's almost like, I'm not saying that guy is Khalil Mack, but you're getting somebody on the edge, that same body type, that 3-4 hybrid rush end. in a younger player where you don't have to spend money. So I think there's some options there, and obviously we'll see what happens with free agency and the draft. I don't think they have to go get Khalil Mack, but I do think he can help the Bucs, and I think it'll be more situational football. I think he has enough in the tank to where you play him in situations the same way with Lavonte David. I don't think he needs to have 14 tackles at his age. I think he needs to play and kind of pull him out in certain situations. So I just don't want Khalil Mack I don't want his career to end on a low note where he's just going out like an old former heavyweight champion, like the way Larry Holmes lost to Mike Tyson. I just don't want to see the great ones just go out, where their legacy is not tarnished because he's a Hall of Famer, but you want to see that guy still show some signs of his old self.
Yeah, and you pointed out exactly what I was going to bring up. One double-digit sack season since 2018. I think at this stage in the game, Khalil Mack is more of a name than a producer. Now, what I will say is if the Bucs decide, they enter talks, Jason and Spytech are chatting over the course of next week when they're in Indianapolis at the Combine, and they realize, you know what? The price to trade for Crosby is just too steep. And they miss on Hendrickson. They miss on, they're not able to get Owe or Mafe. Good with Khalil Mack as a bridge. You sign him to a 1-year deal. Maybe it's a lot of incentives, but you sign him to a 1-year deal and you add him to that rotation and pair him up with, a second-round pick, a Gabe Yakus, a Zion Young, a Romello Height, that kind of player where Mack can be put in on third downs. He can mentor. He can work with the younger talent, including David Walker, who, we don't know who David Walker is right now. We may not know until 2027. Something that I've pointed out before is it took Godwin almost a full season after his ACL tear to start to return to form. And then, of course, once he does, he suffers another catastrophic injury. But the David Walker we get in 2026 may not be the David Walker that we get after 2026 and beyond. There is still that question mark there. So if you bring Mack in as a 1-year stopgap guy while you develop 2 young edge rushers, one from last year's class, one from this year's class, I'm good with that. And if the choice is between Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, I'm taking Khalil Mack 100% of the time. I don't think Bosa is the right guy for that job. And you talk about Mack having some injury issues in the past, missed a game he missed 5 games last season, missed a game the year before. Bosa's injury history is even worse. So if the Bucs think that signing Khalil Mack in free agency is going to solve the problem, then they're in trouble. The season is in jeopardy right from the jump. If that's their way of addressing it and then saying, okay, we're good now, that's a problem. If they're bringing him in as a 1-year guy to get them to the next free agency, get them to the next draft, develop some younger guys, okay, I'm good.
I think Marcus was spot on with his comparison with Lavonte David, because I think that's how you should use both players. Let them be leaders to and mentor a younger guy, like draft someone, David Walker as well. Even Yaya, let him be a mentor to those guys and then play situationally. Marcus said you would take 10 sacks from a guy like that. I think you would take the 5.5 he just had by a guy that's a rotational, situational type player. Like if Khalil Mack was your third or fourth D end and he gets you 5.5 sacks, 6 sacks, I think you're really happy with that next year, given what we've seen this past year where they couldn't get after the quarterback at all. And then he's a guy that if someone gets nicked up for a game can come in and start and you're not a huge drop off. I think that's the kind of player he is at this point in his career. And if you use him that way, I think he could have a big impact on your defense. Again, his impact is going to be probably more off the field with how he helps tutor some of these guys, but then it gives you more depth. So that obviously will help as well. He's one of those guys that, like James said, where he is a big name. And so that's why if you're paying for him for the name, you're making a big mistake. Don't pay him for the name at this point. Do the 1-year deal, some cheap deal, $5 million, I don't know, something like that. Whatever you need to do, and it probably will be his last year unless he has some kind of really strong season where he decides to keep playing. But if he came in 1-year deal, you got some other guys, you got a Max Crosby, or you drafted someone high in the first round that you really like, and he can mentor and be a situational guy. I think, this is a team that then you're back into Super Bowl contention. But as like James said, if he's your guy that it's like, we struck out on Max Crosby, we struck out on Hendrickson, so he's the guy that's going to answer all the questions. He's not that anymore.
Well, what the Bucs need to do, honestly, is create a situation up front where they can get pressure with 4 people. And so if you bring in a guy like Khalil Mack, and let's say he pans out and he's pretty good, and then you got Vita in there, you got Yaya, okay, you got a couple guys. If they could put 4 guys out there to where they could get to the quarterback, similar to what Seattle did, and Seattle blitz when they want to. Seattle start blitzing Drake May like in that second quarter or whatever it was, and the game was it just got away from the Patriots so fast once Seattle knew that all they had to do was stop the run, don't give up a big play, rush 4, drop 7. The Bucs struggled in the secondary. Your secondary is only as good as that pass rush. And so, that's why both units kind of struggled, because the secondary didn't cover long enough, and sometimes the D-line didn't get there fast enough. So that's why the defense was the way it was. The other thing that happened was when the Bucs were winning, and I know at one point when we started the show, they might have had about 25 sacks, I believe, and we were doing predictions on all this other stuff. Well, I think Todd Bowles showed his hand defensively on film to get to 6-2. And I think when the offense was revamped, the defense had been figured out, and we saw that coming straight out of the bye week. So the Bucs don't have a situation where they have 4 guys that can win one-on-one matchups. So that's why you see pressure. And I just think they need to fix some holes in the secondary. Obviously, you got the cornerback situation with Dean, and so they're going to have to solve that there. But you also have to realize if you can get pressure with 4, Khalil Mack is a guy that can probably help you in that department, meaning he may free up some guys. If he shows flashes of himself, he may get doubled. He may get chipped. I mean, the new hot thing in the streets is to leave the tight end in for a half a second to slow down the rush and then delay release. I've been seeing that the last 2 years in college and NFL football. And that's how you slow down pass rushers, is you got to get them at the snap. And so I just think that the Bucs could, if you get Khalil Mack, he has to be a guy who can win one-on-one matchups, or he has to create more than one guy blocking them so that everybody else can get home.
Anything else, Jim?
No, I would. The last thing that I'll say is if I'm ranking the free agent class of edge rushers, Mack is probably somewhere around like 8 or 9 on my list. I would rather take a chance on a younger, less proven guy than an older guy on not just the back 9 of his career, but he's approaching the 19th hole. I would rather take the shot on the younger guy that maybe you strike lightning in a bottle a second time and you find your next Shaq Barrett than someone that is strictly a situational, rotational guy that's going to come with the premium price tag that a name like Khalil Mack is going to command.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Another thing that Khalil will bring is because of his experience. If let's say they traded and got Max Crosby, let's say, and Max Crosby comes out for a play and Khalil Mack comes in, if the offensive lineman takes a breath and says, "Okay, I don't have to go against Max anymore," Khalil can still. He's not what he once was, but he can still make you pay just because of how he mentally thinks about the game, and so it makes it very stressful for an offensive line if you got a guy like that. And then obviously, like I mentioned a few times, he can tutor the younger guys, teach them some of the moves, teach them some of the techniques, some of the stuff that you can get away with that the officials won't see, stuff like that. He can teach you all that stuff to make you a better player as well. So I think there is real value for him. But I think his best fit for Tampa would be if they drafted a first-round defensive end that he can kind of come in and mentor and do all that stuff. That's where I think would be the ideal. If he's around a bunch of veterans, then he's not going to have as much of an impact, in my opinion. But all right, coming up next is Kyle Trask returning to Tampa. We'll talk about it. Well, everyone wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for another segment of the Bucs Squad show. So one of the question marks this offseason, and it's down on the totem pole, is who's going to be the backup quarterback in Tampa? Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater, who was the backup this past year? Is Kyle Trask going to return, who was the backup for, 3 years, I think it was, 3 or 4 years? He was here for quite a while. I did see a report the other day that Kyle Trask could be returning to Tampa. I believe he spent last season with Atlanta. I think he was just on the practice squad, though. I don't remember him actually ever being – I mean, was he elevated when it was Kirk Cousins starting? Can't remember if he was or not.
I don't remember. I know against the Bucs on the Thursday night game, he was holding the clipboard. He was in a hoodie. He was holding a clipboard. He was not dressed for that game. So,
So he probably wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know if he ever got a game day elevation or not.
Yeah. So regardless, he has obviously familiarity with Tampa, but he has familiarity with Zach Robinson, who's now the offensive coordinator. And so I think, again, it's not like it's – what was that? Who was the one who said it where they're asking him about giving too many reps to Peyton Manning in practice, and he said, well, if Peyton Manning goes down, we're in a lot of trouble kind of thing. That's the reality of it. Like, yes, a backup quarterback is important, but if Baker Mayfield goes down, you're in trouble as a team. Like, and that's just the reality of it. Now, you would like someone that knows your system, and so that's why you see some guys where you're like, how does he keep getting this backup quarterback job, and this guy's more talented and he's not getting it? Well, a big part is that guy's been in the system for many years, and that's what Kyle Trask would bring. Is it going to be that? Is that the move that wins the Super Bowl? No, it's not the move that wins the Super Bowl, but it could be an important one for Tampa Bay. I personally would say just draft someone in the 6th or 7th round and do something like that. But if you brought Kyle Trask in because you wanted to save that pick for a defensive guy, then I wouldn't argue that either.
Yeah, something that I have said many times is if Baker Mayfield goes down for 1 or 2 games, okay, you want someone that you can trust that can go in there and get the job done, right? Teddy Bridgewater seemed to be that guy for them last year. That was how they viewed him. Kyle Trask has had a lot of time. Kyle Trask is never going to take a meaningful snap in an NFL game without a unbelievable crisis and disaster happening. He's not good. I would take Teddy over Kyle Trask right now.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, if Baker goes down for 3 months, you're cooked anyway. It doesn't matter. And every year we have a couple of guys that kind of flash and can keep their team afloat. Joe Flacco did a great job for Cincinnati. They weren't winning games, but he was keeping them competitive. We had famously Nick Foles winning a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles when he stepped in for Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, who did a semi-decent job for the Minnesota Vikings, but then again, any of the 3 of us could have done a semi-decent job when we're compared to J.J. McCarthy. That's how this thing goes. Marcus Mariota, okay, he was whatever with Washington. He did not keep them afloat. He did not keep them in contention for when Jaden Daniels came back. So my question is, why would you bring in Kyle Trask? Why would you bring back Teddy Bridgewater? Why would you want those guys? Well, for Kyle Trask, Jaron, as you mentioned, he was with the Falcons. He knows Zach Robinson's offense. That's why you would bring him in. A name that I threw out there that makes a ton of sense to me, I don't know if he would be willing to accept the backup fate. But Atlanta's going to cut Kirk Cousins. He's going to get released. And if he's a guy that Zach Robinson likes, I would love for Kirk Cousins to come in and back up Baker Mayfield because we know he can run the offense. The Falcons' offense was statistically better across the board with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback compared to Michael Penix. So that's an option. Another option, probably not going to be very expensive, is going to know the offense, Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo understands his role in the NFL right now. If Baker goes down for a game or two, Jimmy might be able to go 1-1 for you. He's got the experience. He knows the offense. He might also be completely content hanging out, backing up Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles and playing for Sean McVay. Everybody loves Sean McVay. So at the end of the day, yes, the Bucs need a backup quarterback. I'm not really all that worried about who it's going to be because if you're relying on that guy to win more than 1 or 2 games, you're cooked.
My thing about Kyle Trask is that he's only played in 7 games, and for a second round draft pick, obviously, he was in Tampa the entire time, and then he goes to Atlanta. He's on the practice squad. I don't think he's a solid number 2. He may be a number 3. I think that the Bucs need a veteran that has experience. I like the 2 names that you said, James, because those guys, they've at least played and they've been in the league long enough to understand Tampa Bay's situation. I mean, for Tampa Bay, this is a situation where it's win or go home. Everybody, Todd Bowles, Baker, everybody, just Mike, Levante, just let's start over because that's what the expectations are from their ownership. And they've proven that since they've been there that they will make the necessary changes. At one point, they had 6 coaches in 12 years. And so they'll do whatever it takes to get it right. I think that you get a veteran. I'm going to give you another name too. And I think Russell Wilson would be a solid backup. If he wants to win another title and be a backup guy, and if Baker goes down, you got another quarterback that actually has done it at that high level. He's actually an inch or 2 shorter than Baker. So it's like the same type of stature of quarterback, a veteran. He got a lot of miles on him, but he still can sling it. So, I mean, there's a ton of free agents out there. So they can either get it out the draft, as you said, Jaron. I don't know if you'll trust a rookie in the 5th or 6th round unless his name is Tom Brady. I mean, how many times are you going to get that right? And the Patriots got lucky to have him fall that far. But just understand, we don't want Baker to go down, right? So, but things happen. And the Bucs, they don't have the luxury of not having a solid backup number 2. They just, because the season is going to depend upon it. And the defense, we don't know what they're going to look like yet. I assume they'll be a little bit better, depending on the moves that they make and how Bowles decides to call certain games in certain situations. But Kyle Trask, see, when you're a practice squad guy, here's how it used to be when I played. If you played 8 or more games, then you could never be on the practice squad. So he's right at 7. And so that's why he was able to get signed as a practice squad guy. And what they do with practice squad dudes, I would say by mid-December, the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, that's when you see practice squad guys get elevated so that you can retain their rights contractually. If they don't get elevated, then they're basically on the waiver wire and anybody can sign them. So I don't know if Kyle got bumped up, elevated, and Atlanta still has his rights. But if he didn't, then obviously he'll be back on the market. The last thing I'll say about Trask coming back is he's already played for the Bucs. So it's not like, he's going to a new environment, a new head coach. He's going to a situation that he's been in before. I mean, he was just there in 24. Obviously, he didn't play that much. But, I mean, when you're talking about playing 1 game, his second year, 2 games, and obviously he didn't, do much. The man's only attempted 11 passes. So I don't know if the juice is going to be worth the squeeze. I think you can get a better fit. And me personally, I'd like to see a second-round quarterback prove it when the opportunity arises. And because he lit it up at Florida his last 2 years now. I mean, so the man can sling the ball, but this isn't college football. So as far as him coming back, if he does, he may start out on the practice squad. They may bring him back as another practice squad body. But I think one of the advantages, though, is Zach Robinson did work with the guy last year, and there's some familiarity there.
I'm embarrassed at the beginning that I didn't remember it was Tom Moore who told the story about Peyton Manning. And they asked him during Peyton Manning's years, why did a backup quarterback never take a single snap? And he said, because if 18 goes down, we are expletive, and we don't practice expletive. So that was a great quote. Another guy that, and I like a lot of the names you guys thrown out, and hear me out on this. The reason why I'm throwing this guy's name out there is going to be very cheap. He also plays a very similar style of football to Baker, and that is Sam Howell, who is a free agent, and he made about $1 million last year in Seattle. You could get him that same contract to come to Tampa Bay. He started the 1 year in Washington, and he completed 63% of his passes, nearly 4,000 yards, had 21 touchdowns. He had the 21 interceptions, and that's what everyone remembers. But that was one of the worst offensive lines in the history of the NFL. He was sacked 65 times that year. And he's a guy that, again, young, he can sling it. He plays a very, very similar style to Baker. And so it could be a seamless transition. And like I mentioned, he's very cheap. I mean, I'm looking at his contract. It was, he made $1 million last year. And so he's an unrestricted free agent, obviously. So yeah, I mean, that's another name I would throw out. So I think there are better names out there. The only reason why, and we all three have talked about it, the only reason why Trask would get it was because of his experience with Zach. And I like your idea, Marcus, of maybe bring him back on the practice squad. Bring in a Sam Howell and him and let them compete. And whoever gets it. And the other one's on the practice squad. Because you can sign both for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike the Howell idea at all. Shout out to those of you that remember David Harrison on Locked On Bucs. He loved Sam Howell in Washington, but obviously the Commanders went in a different direction. As far as drafting one, I understand the idea of drafting one. I don't know if I could get behind it in this draft. I think you still need too much help to utilize a draft pick on a quarterback. If it's the 6th or the 7th round, I mean, who are you going to get? You're looking at Jalen Daniels from Kansas. You're looking at my guy, again, Luke Altmaier out of Illinois, which schematically may not be a terrible fit. He made a lot of plays with his legs. He extended plays with his legs, very similar to the way Baker Mayfield does, but I don't think he has the arm strength. I don't think he has the accuracy to be a guy that I would trust to go into a game and win it if Baker goes down. And then Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor, like I would rather take a shot on a corner or a safety with those spots that at least is going to get on the field and help you on special teams, if nothing else, and sign a Sam Howell or sign Josh Johnson. Full circle moment for the guy who's going to be 40 years old. Bring him back to Tampa for 1 year. Spend $1 million, $2 million on a backup quarterback that you hope never sees the field. But you don't need to spend big money. You don't need to spend draft capital for a guy that you're literally praying every night does not see a football field outside of the practice facility.
And since everybody's going for cheap, throw Carson Wentz in there and throw Trubisky. I mean, those guys, $2.5 million, $1 million. I mean, there's some solid names. That's a good number. I mean, good backup, but that were, starters at one point for what it's worth. But they might be able to get a cheap quarterback for like kind of the way you treated like the Khalil Mack situation, just a gap year until you can draft the next guy. But Trask, he was supposed to be, a guy that was going to be up and coming, and to see him on a practice squad means either, it's not working out or you're not that good or your time's almost up in that league.
Yeah, for sure. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about some news around the NFL. Also, we'll do our Q&A. So if you have any questions, get them in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can. Don't go anywhere. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for our final segment of the Bucs Squad show. Reminder, this is just extra content we do. It doesn't take anything away from what James does. We do it Monday and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so check it out. James does great work Monday through Friday, so keep following him. All right, so let's dive into some of the news around the NFL. I think the biggest news that I've seen was all the moves the Miami Dolphins made. Tyreek Hill getting released was a massive story. Not surprising, but massive. And then Bradley Chubb also got released. I feel like it's shaping up for Tyreek Hill maybe to go back to Kansas City. Or, we mentioned Buffalo for Mike Evans. Does he consider going up to Buffalo?
Yeah, a lot of people are connecting the dots for Tyreek and Kansas City. My question is, who's going to take the risk? Which team is willing to take the risk? Because Tyreek Hill's biggest asset has always been what? His speed, right? We know he still has some level of that speed, but he's coming off of a pretty severe leg injury. So how much of that speed is going to go away? He's, how old is he now? He's reaching 33?
32, 33, yeah.
32, 33. So he'll be entering his age 32 season this year. With all the off-field concerns, with all the attitude issues, this is slowly reaching, I don't want to say Antonio Brown status.
Uh-oh.
It's getting to, we'll say, Stephon Diggs status, because Stephon was a problem this past year. He helped the Patriots for sure, but he has been an off-field distraction problem. So who's going to be willing to shell out $20 million for Tyreek Hill? It's got to be a team with the leadership that can absorb that kind of player. Think back to the second three-peat Bulls. They could absorb Dennis Rodman because they had Phil Jackson, they had Michael Jordan, they had Scottie Pippen. And even then, Dennis was a little wild. So who has the structure to take that on? I look at a team, yes, 100% like the Chiefs. Mahomes, if Kelsey comes back, you still have Andy Reid there, but are they willing to bring him back after the way things ended? I look at a team like the Rams. Would they spend the money to add that third receiver weapon, to have Tyreek Hill there with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua and Matthew Stafford to make one more run, because they have the structure? They have Stafford. They have Sean McVay. Those are the kinds of teams that you're going to be whittled down to. I don't think it's going to be a first-time head coach that takes them on, because they don't have the rapport. They don't have the reputation of being able to handle that kind of personality. So I think Tyreek's, his options are going to be really, really limited, which is why, Jaron, to your point, we all keep circling back to the Chiefs, because they know what they would be getting into, and he knows what he would be walking into.
Well, I don't think the Dolphins I don't think they could even afford to keep Tyreek Hill if they wanted to. I mean, his number this year would be at close to $51 million towards the cap anyways. So he is damaged goods, but he those first couple years down there, he had 1,700 plus. Now he looked like the guy, and you got McDaniel, those guys calling plays, and he was putting up video game numbers. I just think those days are over. And when you suffer an injury like he had, I mean, I think these guys recover fast and stuff, but your body's different the older that you get. I just don't think anybody that signs him will be getting the Chiefs Tyreek. I don't think they'll be getting the 2022, 23 Tyreek. And so, the last couple seasons, obviously he got banged up this year, but his numbers just weren't the same. He had about 100 catches, 1,200 yards total. That's not the Tyreek that we know. So in his case, he's going to have to prove physically that he's worth the dollar.
Mhm.
And to your point, James, that off the field stuff, people don't even want it in the locker room. And when you start doing the where your personal relationship is doesn't match your production, or it starts to become a cancer in the locker room because you want attention other than for scoring touchdowns. That's what we love about guys like Mike Evans. You don't hear nothing crazy. His personal life is put to the side. He's not making videos. He's not out here shaking ass and doing stuff. I'm just being honest. So with Tyreek Hill, he has a lot. I'm going to go back to it. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. You don't put $20 million into that. But Kansas City may be the safest place for him to go, and they would love to have him at a cheaper price. But he might not be the same dude. And so Miami had to get rid of him. He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal. They restructured it to where 106 of that was guaranteed. So the guy, he made his money. Now Tyreek has to look at it and say, you're either getting close to the end with this injury. And James, you said there were a couple of teams. I think for him, I honestly think the Raiders, they would entertain his foolishness. He might be a good fit for that traveling circus out there in Las Vegas. He may, Tennessee could be another one. Second year Cam Ward, we'll find out if he's, worth anything. And then I think maybe y'all might have mentioned the Chargers, but whoever gets him, if he gets healthy and he goes to a contender and he accepts that role because he's used to being a number one, he could be a major problem coming up out of there. And obviously you got the Chiefs and the Bills the same way we talked about for Mike. I just think for Tyreek, for what he had going on, once those guys lose that cape and then injuries and off-field distractions, they become kryptonite. We watched Antonio Brown have the best 6-year run statistically out of any receiver in NFL history. And we see where he is now. And I love that kid. I actually coached him when I was at Central Michigan. I was his mentor for 18 months. So I know who I think he was then, but life changes and things happen. So I really want the best for him. But when you start to kind of those superstar receivers, those divas, when they start to get bigger than the program and they start believing the hype and it's not about football anymore, no one wants to touch you. So Tyreek has both. He has a severe injury, a lack of production, and some off the field stuff that could turn a lot of people off unless he takes a huge pay cut.
Yeah, as you guys mentioned, coming into this year was kind of a prove-it year for him because he did have only 959 yards, 6 touchdowns the year before in all 17 games. So it was already like, okay, is he taking a step back? And then obviously he gets injured, tears the ACL, he's getting older. I did think
and Jaron, they didn't make the playoffs. I mean, the coach got fired.
Yeah. And I did think the Rams would be an interesting one. I didn't think about them until James mentioned them. But I feel like Kansas City is probably the most obvious one. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. We do have one question. Is if this next season goes badly, does Tomlin to Tampa make sense? We talked about that back when Tomlin and the Steelers parted ways. I think it does make a lot of sense. Now, I do agree with the kind of counterpoint because it's kind of my point too in terms of I think the next coach is probably going to be an offensive coach and probably should be. So in that sense, do I think he will get it? No. Does it make sense? And if they did hire him, would I be excited? Absolutely. I think it does make sense because I think Tomlin is a better version of Todd Bowles as a defensive coordinator and then as a head coach. But I think they will go offense, and I think they probably should go offense.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The only caveat that I'll throw out there, if the Bucs end up with a top 5 level offense, a la 2024 under Liam Cohen, if they are that kind of offense under Zach Robinson, and Robinson's not getting a ton of bites for a head coach opening, the Bucs don't feel that maybe he's ready for that kind of promotion, that's where you could bring in Tomlin if you're able to retain Zach Robinson and then have a defensive-minded head coach again, somebody to run that side of the football while also keeping the continuity of the offense. That would be the one thing that I would throw out there. But, yeah, if things go badly this year and Todd Bowles gets fired, you're 99.9% chance you're getting an offensive-minded head coaching team.
So let me see. I was sitting here thinking they might need an offensive-minded coach. Let's say Mike McDaniel gets hot and then decides he wants to get back into the chair. They would love to have him. All right. So anybody from that McVay tree is going to be a sexy name. Okay. But here's the thing about, hypothetically, if Bowles is out and Tomlin is in, Tomlin's going to hire a defensive coordinator. That's going to be the biggest difference. So you don't have to have an offensive-minded head coach. I mean, everybody wants the McVay thing. They want the head coach that's calling the plays, that's got all these brainiacs around them, and they're just killing people, or just destroying people. So at the same time, you bring in a Mike Tomlin. Well, Mike's going to hire a D coordinator, but Mike has to prove that he can hire the right offensive coordinator. But he needs, I don't know who the guy was, but when Big Ben was there and they had all the pieces, they had a quarterback, you had young receivers, you had a running back, your defense was doing well. That's when Mike was doing his thing. But that Steelers offense, hasn't been worth a quarter as of late. So Mike would have to do a fine job hiring someone. And if Zach lights it up, Zach's name could be right at the top of that list as well if he just lights it up. And Baker and Mike and those guys go in there and say, hey, this is the guy. Because that happens a lot too. Your superstar players have a say, believe it or not. They don't make the final decision, but they can let you know how they feel about who you hire. Mike Tomlin, he'll go out for 1 year. He'll do television. And then next thing you know, he'll be able to kind of pick and choose where he wants to go. I just don't know if Tampa would do it, but it would only make sense to bring Tomlin in if you have an offensive guru and a defensive guru with him. Start talking about guys like Dickie LeBeau. I mean, when he was calling defenses, towards the end of his career, I mean, that man was a defensive genius. And Jaron, you said something that I may disagree with. You said you think Tomlin was a better D coordinator than Bowles. I'm going to disagree because Tomlin only did it for 1 year.
That's fair.
Tomlin
I'm more referring as a head coach, defensive coordinator,
defensive-minded head coach. Yeah. The conversation isn't close there. But I think for Mike doesn't handle game day strategy. Mike works the sidelines. He goes CEO. I'm not a fan of head coaches calling defense. I'm a fan of head coaches calling offensive plays. I'm fine with that. It's proven to work. I just don't want a defensive-minded coach focusing on trying to strategize. That's why you hire people. So I think it would only make sense if Tomlin came in there, if he hired a defensive coordinator. Let's say like Larry Foote. He played for the guy.
Like you mentioned, if a offensive-minded coach is calling a head coach is also calling the game, they can control the pace of the game, so it also helps them as a head coach. So it's not as big of an issue. Whereas you're a defensive coach, you're not controlling the pace. You're just trying to stop other teams. And so, yeah, I mean, again, Tomlin would make sense in some ways, but I think they do go offensive-minded. Like, Marcus, you said that a lot of star players have say in who the next head coach is. The quarterback has a massive say in who that is specifically. And I'm sure Baker would have a say in terms of wanting an offensive-minded head coach. I personally thought the best chance, and I'm not just saying this because he had a great year, but Liam Cohen, when that move happened, I said then that if Liam is threatening to leave, you might move on from Bowles then and promote Liam because you didn't want a guy like that to leave. Now, I didn't think he'd go have the success he's having with the Jaguars. I thought they wouldn't be very good, and then he maybe back on the market for Tampa Bay. But I just think, and we've gone through a lot of the teams before. Most of the teams that are really successful, offensive-minded head coach. I mean, that's just how it is right now.
Yep, I can certainly get behind all of that, and yeah, I'm with you, Marcus. if I have a head coach calling plays, I would prefer to be the offensive minded than the defensive minded. It wasn't that way in the 90s, but football isn't the same as it was in the 90s. So you have to evolve with the times, and that part of that evolution is if you're going to have a play calling head coach, it needs to be the one on the offensive side. Even Bruce Arians, he had Byron Leftwich, he still vetoed it. He still took over in the fourth quarters. The fourth quarter was still his time. And once he left, we saw what happened with Byron Leftwich, who's now out of coaching completely because he did such a bad job of having that responsibility all on his own shoulders and not having his mentor to lean on. So, yeah, hopefully that's not a conversation we have to have after the season. Hopefully we're talking about a deep playoff run and the Bucs having the pieces for Todd Bowles' defense to be what it was back in 2020, 2021, 2022.
But real quick, to dispel all of this, what messes it up is that McDonald called the defense in Seattle as a head coach. So
Yeah.
it can work either way.
Right. Yeah, maybe it does work out. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on the Locked On Bucs Squad Show. We'll be back Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, you can check out James the rest of the week. Until next time, fire the cannons.